Alright, in the last video I read through very many of these special publications that you can find on the Computer Security Resource Center website. Just go to csrc.nis.gov. We left off right here with 800 and 160. I couldn't tell you how many we read last time just because there seems to be no numerical order or logic to these. Not that I can detect. If there is some sort of pattern, I'm not seeing it yet. Well, here we go with 800-157. This will be guidelines for derived personal identity verification credentials. And I thought we already had a PIV1. So here's a two-parter question. Which publications relate to personal identity verification and how many of them are there? Because we might have already read more than two. Look at that. 156 is another PIV1. This is representation of PIV, chain of trust, for import and export. Our next acronym, I always thought sounded so cool, BIOS. And this deals with low-level stuff that I love so much, but this is BIOS Integrity Measurement Guidelines. Just like the last video, I'm going to keep a collection of these that I want to read. And just like last time, I'm not going with any particular pattern here. I should create a standardized format, but I read about standards, not create them. 800-154 is a guide to data-centric system threat modeling. That just sounds really interesting. 153 is guidelines for securing wireless local area networks. 152 is a profile for U.S. Federal Cryptographic Key Management Systems, CKMS. 150 is a guide to cyber threat information sharing. Open source is a great way to share threat information. And open source intelligence is a really interesting topic if you ever have time to look into. I wonder if they'll provide any guidelines for that. We have another BIOS one here, 147B, and just plain 147 is BIOS as well, so BIOS protection and BIOS protection guidelines for servers. So I might read all of those. And I love cloud computing, so 146 is cloud computing synopsis and recommendations. 145 is the NIST definition of cloud computing. 144 is guidelines on security and privacy in public cloud computing. 142 is practical combinatorial testing. Am I pronouncing that right? According to Google Docs here, this word is not even a word, but if you want a practical guide to testing it, maybe you would go to 142 here. 140F is the CMVP approved non-evasive attack mitigation test matrix. And this relates to an ISO IEC standard apparently. There's another one just like this. This is non-invasive. This is approved authentication mechanisms. Different standard number as well. Now we're going into CMVP approved sensitive parameter generation and establishment methods. We have a long series of CMVPs here. 140C relates to approved security functions. 140B is security policy requirements. 140A is documentation requirements. 140... Oh, this is interesting. FIPS 140-3. I know about being FIPS compliant in code. So this might be a publication number I should remember. That being just 140. Then we jump down to 137. This is Information Security Continuous Monitoring, ISCM, for Federal Information Systems and Organizations. Revision 1 of 135 is the recommendation for existing application-specific key derivation functions. Then another recommendation for cryptographic key generation, then for password-based key derivation. Part 1 for storage applications. I don't see a Part 2 anywhere, but 131A, transitioning the use of cryptographic algorithms and key links. 130 is a framework for designing cryptographic key management systems. 128, guide for security-focused configuration management of information systems. 126 is the technical specification for the Security Content Automation Protocol, SCAP. Actually, I already started a video series on that one. So when answering a simple question like this, like what is SCAP, you should say things like, well, rather than try to recall this from memory, here we go. But I know SCAP from its components, such as XCCDF, OVAL. I don't know much about ARF at all, but it sounds funny to say. So we have ARF, but then we have CCE, Common Configuration Enumeration, and then CPE, and then the last two you probably are familiar with, CVE and CVSS. So 126, and we're on revision 3, so we can skip 2. Same thing, right? And skip 1 there. It says SCAP 1.3. Oh, this one's interesting. It's an annex to revision 3. I'll just ask that what is interesting about 801.26a. Then I'll give a little hint here, because what that should do is remind you that this is like the first time we've found a special publication that's an annex. So it's there on my to-do list. So there, 126 revision 1 is there, and then 125, something new. 125b, secure virtual network configuration for virtual machine protection. I'm just going to call that one VMs. 125 is security recommendation for server-based hypervisor platforms. So there you go, A/B. Plainode 125 is a guide to security for full virtualization technologies. One more / there in my notes. 124 revision 1 is about the guidelines for managing the security of mobile devices in the enterprise. 123 is a general guide to server security. 122, guide to protecting the confidentiality of personally identifiable information. Oh, that doesn't sound interesting for me, but if you're just starting out, that might be a good place. 121, though, is a guide to Bluetooth security. 119, guidelines for the secure deployment of IPv6. The IPv6 evangelists should read that. Help them become better evangelists. 116 is guidelines for the use of PIV credentials in facility access. 115 is a technical guide to information security testing and assessment. 114, user's guide to telework and bring your own device security. I just wonder how popular BYOD is nowadays. Well, 113 is a guide to SSL VPNs. They should probably be TLS now. Well, 111 is a guide to storage encryption technologies for end-user devices. 108, recommendation for key derivation using pseudo-random functions. 107, revision 1 is a recommendation for applications using approved hash algorithms. More hashing. 106, randomized hashing for digital signatures. Recommendations for digital signature timeliness. Alright, another to-do list item, 101, guidelines on mobile device forensics. So 100 is Information Security Handbook. This is a guide for managers. So maybe not so technical. 98 is guidelines for securing radio frequency identification systems. This one I think for me is a must read. Number 97 is establishing wireless robust security networks, a guide to 802.11i. Okay, that's back in 2007. 896 is PIV card to reader interoperability guidelines. Next, a guide to secure web services. Then a guide to intrusion detection and prevention, IDS, IDPS. Sorry to just vomit a bunch of acronyms at you. And this is revision 1 in its draft form, though there's nothing for comments, but I wonder how that's still a draft. Published 2012, that's a long time ago. Did they just give up on this? Or did they break it apart into HIDS and IDS, like I was trying to say earlier? But okay, number 92 is a guide to computer security log management. 90C is a recommendation for random bit generator constructions. And if you're just tuning in here, we are on part 2, so I think I'll stop this part when we get to my favorite of them all, which is 83. But we're on 90B, and that is the recommendation for the entropy sources used for random bit generation. That'll be an interesting read, because there is some really poorly chosen sources for entropy. And then some very unique ones as well. 90A is recommendation for random number generation using deterministic random bit generators. 89 is a recommendation for obtaining assurances for digital signature applications. 88, guidelines for media sanitization. So I wonder what that means. Is that dealing with data types? 87, revision 2 is codes for identification of federal and federally assisted organization. 86 is a guide to integrating forensic techniques into incident response. 85B-4 is PIV data model test guidelines. 85B is just PIV data model test guidelines. Okay, same thing. I wonder why the dash is right there. Well, going down here, we're at 85A, which is PIV card application and middleware interface test guidelines. 84 is Guide to Test, Training, and Exercise Programs for IT Plans and Capabilities. 83 is a Guide to Malware and Incident Prevention and Handling for Desktops and Laptops. Here's a Guide to Industrial Control Systems. 81-2 is Secure Domain Name System Deployment Guide. That one definitely goes on my to-do list. 79-2 is a guideline for the authorization of personal PIV card issuers, PCI, and derived PIV credential issuers. 78-4 is cryptographic algorithms and key sizes for personal identity verification. So lots of PIV here. If you look at the first video, you'll see more PIV. But this special publication 77 is a guide to IPsec VPNs. It's also the name of a great YouTuber. You just have to add an extra P. But 77 revision 1, then there's just 77 right there. Make sure to read the right or most updated one. Hey, I forgot. I said I'd stop at 83, and did I just completely skip it? Oh, that's not my favorite one. It is 53. So I hope you're ready for more. Let's keep going. So I read about IPsec here, biometric specifications for PIV, interfaces for PIV, guidelines on PDA forensics. We don't want any public displays of affection or you will be prosecuted. Just kidding, this obviously means personal device something. There we go, personal digital assistance, 71 is a recommendation for key establishment using symmetric block ciphers. That goes on my to-do list because I like cryptography. So I asked the question, what's the difference between block ciphers and stream ciphers? I think that's pretty cool. Block ciphers get their very own special publication. 70 is a national checklist program for IT products, guidelines for checklist users and developers. 67 is a recommendation for the triple data encryption algorithm, TDEA block cipher. 66 is an introductory resource guide for implementing the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Yep, right there, 2008. So they have their own special security rule. So I'll ask that question, what law act has its own special security rule? That would be HIPAA. 63 is a digital identity guideline. 63C, digital identity guidelines, federation and assertions. 63B, same kind of guidelines, but this is authentication and life cycle management. Then we have enrollment and identity spoofing. 61, revision 2 brings some newness with computer security incident handling. This next one is long. It's 60. It's guide for mapping types of information and information systems to security categories. So this is appendices. So that appendice goes to this volume 1. So we have a couple of these NIST special publications that are in 2 volumes, 2 being the largest set of volumes I've found so far. 59 is a guideline for identifying an information system as a national security system. Interesting choice of words there, identifying, huh? Well, 58 is security considerations for voice over IP systems. Wow, that's pretty intense for VoIP to have its own special publication. 57, Part 3, recommendation for key management. This is application-specific key management guidance. Part 2 for key management is best practices. And Part 1 would be just general. And this is revision 5 of the general part. There was another one. That was revision 4. We can see a sign of revision 3 or anything over here. But as we move down to 56C revision 1, recommendation for key derivation methods and key establishment schemes, then we have a revision 2, it's 56B. This is recommendation for pairwise key establishment using integer factorization cryptography. And that's very recent, 3/21/2019. So revision 2 must be why it's so recent. Now 56A is all about the recommendation for pairwise key establishment schemes using discrete logarithm cryptography. I wonder if these publications are talked about in the Stack Exchange cryptography forum at all. This is a pretty fun website to read, kind of tough to hang though. A lot of it goes way over my head. Okay, we're almost there though. 55 talks about performance measurement guide for information security. And here's 53. Security and privacy controls for information systems and organizations. This is a draft of revision 5. You could look at revision 4 here. You could look at 53A revision 4 here. This is assessing security and privacy controls in federal information systems and organizations. So building effective assessment plans. And this publication right here is the main reason, well, not 53A, just regular 53. But this is how I got down this rabbit hole in the first place. So I'll leave the rest for you to read. We actually got pretty close to the end. What's the number of the last one? Oh, we're in the 500s there, 299. We just find the lowest 800 out of curiosity. 15. MISPC minimum interoperability specification for PKI components. So interesting. Well, if you made it this far, thanks for watching.